self-portraits using graphite. Today I'm going to teach you how to make a self-portrait using the grid system. For this you're going to need an eraser, pencils, ideally if you have a tortillon or blending stump, that would be nice. And then you're also going to need a white sheet of paper, a ruler, and some sort of digital photograph to work from. There is also a grid that you can use, a grid paper, where you're going to be printing your photo right onto it, but that can also be done by hand. So hope you enjoy, subscribe if you like, and follow along. So our first step in actually working on the final project is going to be to create a grid. So using a ruler, now you can size this any size you would like. So if you have your 1-inch grid on your photo, you can expand it, as big as you want, just using the grid. So it's all, as long as it's cubed, you're fine. So for this particular paper, we're going to do 1 1/4 or 1.25. So I'm going to start with the ruler on the edge of the paper, and I'm going to be marking out every single 1 1/4. So it's going to go 1 1/4 to 2 1/2 to 3 3/4 to 5, followed by 6 1/4, 7 1/2, 8 3/4, 10. Alternatively, you can take the ruler and just keep sliding down 1 1/4. This is easier for the majority of the population I teach to figure out. So this is usually what I suggest, and that way you know you're getting the right measurement every time. You don't have to leave it up to your math skills. Now this won't go all the way to the edge of the paper, which is fine. We're going to be cutting some off. But because there is that little extra piece there, so this is about 1/2 inch here that's going to be left over, we don't want that to be on opposite sides. So if I just flip the paper here, that 1/2 inch will not be there. So unless I start at 1/2 inch and then work my way across, it is going to be off. So what I tell all my students to do, instead of flipping the paper, I just move the ruler. So my paper's in the same direction. I'm now going to just slide the ruler up, and I'm going to be doing the same thing. So I'm marking out 1 1/4, 2 1/2, 3 3/4, 5, and then you do the same thing. Just keep working it down. 7 1/2, 8 3/4, 10. And again, either way, slide the ruler or just keep marking it out. And then you'll see the same 1/2 inch is now on the same side. So to connect these, the easiest way to do this is just line your ruler up dot to dot. Press your fingers down so that you're placing pressure equally. Slide your hand back on the pencil and just lightly run it down. So we barely want a line to show up because we are going to end up erasing this grid eventually. So if you press down too hard or you push hard enough that you scratch the paper, that is going to show up in your final project. So it's really important that you press down lightly. So I'm going to do this throughout the rest of the piece, and I'm going to show you the other side quick just before I do that. This is going to be the exact same thing. So you're going, let's try on this end. You're going to be going 1 1/4, 2 1/2, 3 1/4, or sorry, 3 3/4, 5, and or alternatively 1 1/4, 1 1/4 all the way down. So again, you'll end up with some extra. So I'm going to have 3/4 left on the edge here. So I'd move the ruler up, making sure that it's going to be on the same side, and then exact same thing we're going to connect it through. So let me jump ahead. All this will be connected, and I'll show you the grid. Okay, so I'm just finishing up. I've jumped ahead, and I now have the grid completely made. Remember, you'll have that extra on both sides, and we're actually not going to be using all of this anyways. So I'm going to start by putting A1 in the corner. So A1 marks each box, so there's A1. That would make this A, so that's my row, and then my columns 2, 3, 4. So I'm putting these in the center so they're easy to see. Again, drawing lightly because they will be erased. And then I've got my letters going down. The way this works, if I said draw on D5, I'd follow D. I'd go over to row 5, and this is, column 5, and this is where I would be starting to draw. So we use this system to transfer everything over. So I'm going to have this go all the way down. This will go to O, which we aren't actually using. So let me show you the actual sheet we're working from. So there's my version and here's the version of paper that we're going to be printing on. So I've got this set to 9 and this goes to K. So we know that we're going to have some extra. So all of this is going to be trimmed off, and we're also going to be losing all of that row there. So this is approximately the size difference. So we're going from 1 inch to about 1 1/4, and that's how much bigger your portrait's going to be. So let's jump ahead to a picture actually printed on the paper, and I'll show you how to start transferring that over. Okay, so I've got a picture printed out on my grid paper. It's important to note that if you're doing this at home and you don't have pre-printed grid paper like this that you can send through the printer, all you have to do is make one using a ruler. So this is 1 inch by 1 inch. It's off a little bit on each side, but in general, if you're making a cubed grid, you will always be able to transfer. It does not matter if it's printed or it's drawn in pen. And in fact, I used to make my students do it on with Sharpie, ultra-fine point Sharpie on their picture, but for time and for accuracy, it's just easier now for me to print them and mass produce them, and it gives us more time to actually work on the rest of the project. So if you're doing this at home, that's all you have to do is just create a grid and then label the exact same A1, and you'll be able to transfer it. So we're going to be transferring the image over, so as we're transferring, we're making it larger. So the easiest way to do this for most people, because most people are right-handed, you're going to be starting from the the left-hand side, and you're going to pick up either where the shoulder is, or for anyone who has long hair, it would be wherever the hair starts. So that's the first one you want to go in. So mine, shoulder starts in I1. So I'm going to look at the box, and that's the only thing I'm addressing in this moment. So I1, which for me is I1 is there. Now remember, it's going to be bigger. If this is about halfway, and that is going up another quarter, I know it's going to be about there, and then this ends at about halfway. And then I'm going to trace the angle, get a feel for the angle. This is called muscle memory, so I'm picking up using my muscle memory, and I'm going to draw it in. Then if we're moving to I2, and then I'm going to go I2, this is about halfway. I trace the angle, go up, that's about halfway, and we're just going box by box. So I'm only worrying about that one particular box. H goes up, so that's halfway, that's halfway. I've got a little gap, maybe a little lower. And then the next one, we've got more to deal with. So those ones are particularly easy because it's just one line. As we get more into these boxes where you're seeing more, it's going to be a little more challenging. So my neck comes through, and it almost splits the box right in half. So that's easy to gauge, and that's something that I can start with. So it almost splits it at a little bit of an angle. And then I'm going to trace in from that point over. So trace it a couple times, over. And I can extend that down. So just by going box by box, and I've got a little bit of a line here to deal with too. It's going to go across like that. And now there's nothing else in that box I have to worry about. From here you can start going down. So if I wanted to extend this down, I can start placing it on there, or I can alternatively go up. I think it's far better just go up and work your way around. Check the silhouette, make sure everything's fine, and then come back to all that detail, because if the silhouette is off, the whole drawing's going to be off. So we might as well get that out of the way and make sure that it's going to be accurate. So let's keep going up. And this comes through. It's almost to the edge. Starts about halfway. Starts about halfway. Almost to the edge. Alright, so that is to the edge. That's going to happen. So when that happens and you're realizing something's not off, those little millimeters will make a difference when it's supposed to look like you. So I'm going to retrace, readjust, figure out what went wrong, and then I didn't give it enough curve there. So that'll happen to the majority of you. And then as you go up, some of you will get so good at this or have the ability to just look and be able to guess roughly where it would be. So because I do these all the time, I'm able to look, and without actually tracing the angle, I can get rid of that memory step because my hand-eye coordination has been trained to follow this a little more closely. So if you're that side of the brain, your hand-eye coordination on, feel free just to move right onto that. This goes off the page, It's going to come back down. Let's see if you can even see that. There you go. It's going to come back down roughly in 6, cross a little bit into 7, and it's going to come into there. The air comes through it, crosses just slightly into that box, follows it down, leaves a piece there, And then I'm going to pick up back. This was. And now we're back to the neck. So we can bring the neck in. That follows the line pretty closely. That's where that shirt is. Alright, now this I can already tell is too low. Let's give it a trace. There we go. Alright, so that's how the grid works. That's the hardest portion of this, is just getting this whole thing placed. So when this is trimmed, it's going to look like the photo now. I do check this usually, so I'm going to go through box by box and sort of just with my eye look at different angles. So I'm thinking that part maybe needs to come out a little bit more. So all those little edges I'll go through and I'll check. I'll curve down. This I feel like there's a little more showing there. I can come through. So I usually check all that, and then I'll tell my students next you really should just close out some of these easier lines. So this is about halfway there, about halfway. I can start to fill in all these spots, and makes this a lot easier to work with. Same with the shirt. All right. So the next step from here is we would start closing in some of the other features before we start the facial mapping. So I'm going to skip ahead, but I will be doing these lines here. I'll be closing off this part here. And that'll give us all that's left is the facial mapping. So let me skip ahead really quick and do that. Okay, so I've drawn in the shirt and the hairline, so now I'm going to start some of this facial mapping for you and show you what that looks like. So when you're drawing the facial features, it's best to draw in the dots first, so where I want these to be placed, and check it before you actually start the drawing. So I'm going to be putting a dot from the eye to the eye, the edge of the nose to the tip, so that'll place where the nose goes, and then the edge of the lips to the lips. So using those indicators, placing it. And I'm doing the white of the eyes, so the tear duct there. The white, not the actual eyelashes, so they will take up more space once you get them drawn in and colored. Let's see, that goes up a little bit. And these aren't always perfect. Sometimes you have to go through back and adjust. So I made some adjustments as I've gone through. That happens with all of these, and as you shade them, they will look more like you, but it's hard to get it perfect, so I wouldn't worry too much about getting them exactly right. We're just trying to give ourselves the best start we can get using these dots. Alright, so there's all those dots. Now we're going to start drawing in the facial features. There is another video that's going to be posted that shows you how to do a simplified version, or a line, contour line drawing of all the facial features. So you can watch that as well if you need more help in this area. But I'm going to zoom in the camera and we're going to work on just these portions. Okay, so we have the dots in, and like I said, I'm going to be zooming in and working on just certain facial mapping using those dots I just created. So if you look at the picture, some of this is going to be a lot easier if you do a tracing first. So this is using your muscle memory, going through and finding the angle, for example, like above the eye. I'm going to be tracing that first. I'm going to be filling it in and sort of working my way around. So a little piece by piece, making sure I'm getting the correct angle. And I'm just going to start by putting in the basic shapes of everything and see if it looks right before I move on to the actual detail of it. For the nose, we're just going to start with the bottom shape here. Come around to the nostril, and the outer nostril. And then we're going to bring it around. And then for the lips, let's trace this line. I usually when people smile, their upper lip will become very thin. It's going to look smaller than it actually may be. I'm going to draw in the teeth. And I usually don't draw in the bottom teeth regardless of what's actually showing there. Okay, so let's fill in some of these descriptor lines. I'm going to be filling in using the picture where all these lines are. And let's go back to the eyes. It will be hard on the photos to see where the actual pupil is, but that's about the correct size for it. And then we're going to add in the eyebrows. So for eyebrows, you start going up. Work your way across. And then we're going to go to the ears. So for the ear, you're going to do the upper arc. As your tragus. And for mine, I have a line come through here and here. And then the lobe. And then usually your ears will look different because most people tilt their head as they close. So this one may have a different shape to it. And that usually just gives some general guidelines of which way that hair will go. But you really don't have to fill this in until you start doing the shading, which we'll do in a second here. But it does help see the overall picture and sort of where that would fall in place. So I actually made another version of this, so I'm going to skip right to that. But the next part of this, I would be cutting off those extra portions, as well as taking an eraser. I'm going to start to get rid of all of these grid lines and numbers and letters because we don't need them anymore. So I usually use a big eraser on the outside here, and then once I get closer to the face, I'll switch over to my pencil one and just start getting rid of all this so that we have just the drawing there. This is when I said earlier you should make sure that you're using light lines when you make that grid. This is why, because we're going to be getting rid of these. I want to make sure that they don't show up. So I'm going to erase everything out, have this cut, and then I'll jump to the next portion, which is going to be the shading. Okay, so we're now on to the shading portion of the video. I'm going to start by describing what I'm doing from this half, sort of work my way back and forth. And then I'm going to do time lapse for the second half and just show you how to fill it in quick, because I don't want this to be a crazy long video. But I do need to describe what I'm doing as I'm doing it. So the first half, I'll do for you and describe as it's going, and then we'll do time lapse for a second. You can just see it come together. So when you're drawing and you're doing shading, the easiest way to do this is to just start with the darks first. And when you're able to push those darks, everything else will start to fill in as you go. A lot of people, when they first start drawing, are scared to go really dark, or they hold those back. And what happens is you start to get washed out. And remember, most people aren't staring right at on top of these drawings. So you do want to make sure you're going pretty dark. So if you look at our photo, most people, when you take a digital photo, especially if it's black and white, your darkest areas are almost always going to be the same. You'll always pick them up: the pupil of your eye, your nostril, the inside of your mouth, inside of your ear. Those four areas, sort of regardless of what hair color you have, what skin tone you have, those will almost always be your darkest areas. So that's usually where I start. So I just started by filling in the pupils, and now I'm going to actually bring in the darker tone to it. Next I'm going to fill the nostril, And it's important to note this is after everything is drawn and it's how I want it, because once you go this dark, it is hard to erase out and it does scratch the paper. So I do make sure that I actually have everything drawn out well before I do this part. Alright, so there's the darks. Then I'm going to find the next darkest area, and for most people that's going to be the eye. So that's what we'll focus the next couple of minutes on. I'm actually going to stop with the camera and zoom up so you can see all the little lines in the eye. So just give me a second here. Alright, so when it comes to the eye, the first thing you're going to want to do is give it another outline. So this upper eyelid will always be dark. This one generally is dark as well, maybe not as dark as the top, but it will have more color to it. I color in the tear duct. Depending on the color of your eyes, this may change in intensity or how much color. So my eyes are hazel. In this photo they appear very dark, and I've got the brown color to them, so I'm going to start by just laying down some color. So one of the tools you can have, and again, for blending, there's tons of different ways you can do this. A lot of times I'll just take my finger and do the blending with my fingertip, but if you have at your disposal a tortillon or a stump blender, this does make it a little easier to get a smooth tone. Start by filling all that in. And use my pencil to redefine that area. And then typically in the color of your eye you will have more than one tone in there, so there's usually a darker ring. For hazel eyes, there's typically a light brown or a light green around the edge. And then you're going to have a dark line for where your eyelid is. And then you're going to fill in some eyelashes. So eyelashes go away from the nose. So they're going to change direction depending on which side you're on. And then I'm going to use the side of my pencil to create some of these shadows. So you don't want a harsh line, especially if you're younger. I'm just going to use the pencil and then use the stump blender to start adding some color around the eye. Just going to spread that out from that area. And you'll see this start to take shape and look like it's coming forward. Usually after I do any sort of blending, I redefine a lot of this. So you don't want to lose all that intensity in the darks. And if you want this to look more realistic, you can also take a little highlight out, and that will make the eye appear like it's moist or wet. It's got that reflection mark from the light source. Let's amp up the color on these eyebrows. So when you start going up, work your way across. And then depending on what color they look like, it's just all about hand pressure. It doesn't really change the pattern. I'm going to take my blender, pull some of the color out from it. And again, I always redefine the area. I want there to be some dark lines in there. And we're going to work our way out. So the next area is going to be around the eye right here. Just going to add some color. Blend it out. And this actually needs to be a little lower for me. Alright, so if you did this correctly, it's going to look like a black eye. Everything is going to start to make sense as you build in layers. So I'm going to do each one and sort of work my way around the page. But I'm not going to adjust these darks just because it looks weird now, because I know that's going to be fixed in a little bit. So I'm going to move down to the nose next. The nose, we already have our dark in there. So really all of it is just about defining the shape using value. So I know that these areas are going to be darker. I'm going to add some pigment to it. I'm going to redefine the area. Blend some of this out. I was going to blend some of it up because this is a three-dimensional shape as well. well. And pull a little bit onto the nose. So that highlight, remember, will be the very tip of the nose, and that 3D shape there. So redefine. And on my face, I also have a line that's pretty prominent there. Again, 3D shape. Make sure you're hitting a little bit on both sides. And then my nose will have a shadow created there, which goes on the lip. And also a line there. If you feel like any area gets too dark, you can just erase it out. So there's a couple areas that I may end up changing a little later. But you want a little bit of color there too. So just by adding in those little bits of color, I've now created that portion that this is coming out. It's flattening that way. Let's bring this down a little bit. It went all dark right here. I'm just going to erase it out, blend right over it, and it should smooth itself out. Alright, for the lips, the upper lip is always darker than the lower lip. I'm going to add in basically just a coloring. Color. Go over with the blender. And then normally when I do this, for some reason I always go a little dark, so usually erase out a little bit more and recolor it in. And then it's very important that you get that crisp line before it hits the teeth. And for teeth, you just go in between each one. Take your blender, go over each line, a little bit on the top there. And then we sort of just hope no one really investigate too much further into the teeth. As long as they're drawn well and you got everything else looking good, people won't really notice them. And for the lower lip, it's always going to start darker and get lighter as it goes up. So I add some pigment to the bottom, drag it up. And then there's always that highlight, same as in the eye if you want it to look like it's wet. Erase a little out. And then there's typically a strong shadow right underneath. Let's try that next. Alright, moving over to the ear. The nice thing about the ear is no one's really going to pay attention to it, so I usually just take and start by just getting rid of the tone by making it gray. And once it's gray, then all I have to do is just touch up some of the three-dimensionality of it. I want this lobe to look like it comes around. I'm going to add in those. And again, it's going to look weird because nothing else around there is colored. So let's thin out the face. So if it appears wide, chances are it's because it just needs to be shaded. I'm going to shade all the way around the face. Pulling some of this color into the face. End up with any streaks, which will happen. Lightly erase, go back through the blender or your finger. And then you'll almost always have more dark shadows right in this area. That part won't get as much light, so you're going to have to hit that twice. And then you'll also have a darker portion right next to your eye. There's a small indent there. Hit this area. And then if you want this cheek to really stand out, you follow the way the cheekbone will go. So I keep going back and forth and back and forth. And as I do this, I can already tell that this did not get dark enough. So we're going to add some color in there. And then we'll move on to the chin. So chin, you want to have a curl. Usually there'll be some sort of line right there depending on how much weight you have in your neck or how far that chin pops out. Add that in there. And then a lot of photos may not have this, but I usually do a crisp dark line right there. Just give it a separation because when you start shading in the neck here, you usually end up making this a little darker. It typically looks better if there's more of a shadow. just by making it a little darker underneath here, it's going to make all of that face really stand out and look more 3D. And same with the neck, if you want that to be 3D, give a little darker edge to it, blend it out, and it'll give it more of a 3D look. Darkness all the way through there, top of the head over here, run that color all the way up. And there'll be a pretty strong shadow underneath the hair, where the scalp and the hair meet. And typically people have a shadow sort of run across their brow line there. And some people, depending on how far your brow line comes out, you'll also have one a little bit come through there. All right, next we're going to start working a little bit on the hair. I'm going to zoom back out, so I'm going to just pause this and zoom it. Alright, so I've zoomed it out so you can see the top of the hair. The trick with the hair is just draw just what you see the pattern. So depending on where your part is, so I have a part there, my hair goes that way, there's the cowlick that comes down there, this is shorter, it's buzz. So I'm going to start from that area, right here. I'm just going to start by following the lines that I see. And it's sort of just like you were taught when you were younger how to draw hair. You start with those really straggly, just tons of lines over and over and over. This will obviously change based off the color, so that affects your hand pressure. It'll also affect how many lines you're doing. So the darker your hair, the more layers you got to do. I'm just starting by adding in the lines. And when you're doing short hair, or buzzed hair like this, you're just doing the same thing, following the pattern, but it's a lot more lines with smaller strokes. And it usually gets darker too, so depending on the season or how much your hair gets bleached out and the color, some of mine will get a lot darker towards the ear, the sideburns are, and as it goes up, it starts to get blonder. I always have that dark outline where the hair ends. Alright, so we've got one layer of color in there. Now we're going to blend it. Alright, so that's what I consider layer one. Usually it takes 2 or 3 or 4 layers to get the actual hair color. So now I'm going in with the next layer. So that first color was just the regular tone of your hair. These darker ones are going to be the lowlights or the shadows. And then if you look at your picture, so I've got a cowlick here. Cowlicks are typically darker because they flip around. So that portion of my hair is darker, and there's some darker tones right there. So if you look in the picture here, I've got dark here, dark in there, dark towards the back. A darker portion right in there, darker there. Blend it a little more towards the scalp. I can give it another blend, just smooth some of those out a little bit. And then when you're working on highlights, you just use your eraser. So if I want to bring out some more of that blonde color, all I have to do is erase right on, following the same pattern. And that brings out your lowlights, your Alright, towards the bottom of the neck, so where this hits the shirt. We have to give some color, so if you put some color right in between the two. And blend it out, it's going to look like the skin going into the shirt and creating a shadow there. So we want to have tone. Again, any streaks or anything like that, just get rid of. Blend out. So I drew in where the Adam's apple would be. These look far better if it's just a shadow. You don't want a really, really harsh line in there. And it goes around. You might see a little portion of the collarbone shadow in there too. Alright, so there's about half the face. Like I said, I was going to describe it as I go. I'm not going to waste time in the video talking about the clothing because really it's just a matter of coloring it in. So depending on the color that it is, you just go through, redefine some of these areas, and just start adding in whatever pigment it happens to be. So I'm going to make this sort of a gray tone. As you go, you're going to do that. Blend it all. And you want there to be some sort of fold in the fabric. All you really have to do is just add a darker area and it'll look like that. It's bending in. And that's how you create the fabric texture. So I will get to that in the time lapse as I finish this up. But that was the majority of that. So now I'm going to move into the time lapse part where I'm just going to work and record it and I'll speed it up to 4x6. One of those speeds, and we'll see how much we can get done. So hope you enjoy and follow along, and this should at least identify some of the areas that you want to make sure that you're making sure that you shade in as you go.